Welcome to Fix It Home Improvement, covering projects that every homeowner should know and great products for home and garden.
Hi, I'm JC, and this is where we share weekly home improvement tips. I'm here with my co-host, Cindy.
Hello, JC.
Hi, Cindy. This week, we're going to be talking about smart switches and outlets, and we'd like to thank Johnny Lai for liking and sharing the podcast. And we'd also like to thank Player FM for making us the podcast of the day. The first patent for a toggle light switch was in 1917, and one of the first motion sensors to turn on a light was developed in the 1950s. The clapper came out in 1985 and was designed to respond to two claps to turn on a smart plug. And the smart clapper came out in 1992. So that smart plug had two receptacles on it, so two claps turned one side on and off, and three claps would operate the other side. Smart light switches are becoming more popular in hardware stores and home centers, and the in-wall smart switch can give you control of your lights with an app on your phone, and some can be controlled with a smart speaker, like the Amazon Echo or Google Assistant. And it's not just turning your lights on and off. You can set up schedules or use it for security lighting, or you can dim your lights and, set kind of a mood. And you can combine the smart switches with smart home systems that are using sensors for geofencing.
What's that?
So this is using the GPS and the Bluetooth signal in your smartphone to know where you are in your house. So you can have your switches turn on and off lights when you get home. You can have sensors that turn lights on as you move through the house. You can also have multiple people in a system like this. So when the last person leaves the house, all the lights turn off. You can have a security schedule, so the lights will turn on and off so it looks like somebody's home. And the thermostat will adjust itself to save the most energy. So it's pretty wild. You can build a pretty elaborate smart system with some of these devices.
Space age.
I spoke to Leviton, and they suggested starting out small with one or two smart light switches and smart plugs. And their smart light switches work with Amazon Echo, Google Assistant, and Nest thermostats, their cameras, and their sensors. And so you can use a smart switch for your front porch, for example. You can turn your light switch on and off from an app on your phone, or you can control it with your voice through a smart speaker. You can also set up schedules, so it'll turn on and off by itself at set times. And then for your main living area, you can use a smart dimmer switch, and that will control your lights so you don't have to get up. Let's say you're watching TV and you want to dim the lights. You don't have to get up. How cool is that?
It's very cool.
Smart plugs are wireless devices that you plug into an outlet, and then you plug something into the smart plug, and you can control it with your phone or your voice with a smart speaker if it's set up for that. And the plugs are just an easy way to control lamps in a room. You can turn them on and off. Some are dimmable. You can set up schedules for security lighting. And if you're in a bedroom, for example, and you're ready to go to sleep and you have your lamp plugged into something like this, you don't have to get up to turn off the light. And Leviton has a smart lamp plug that's dimmable, so you can adjust the light levels. And I spoke to Top Greener, and they suggested using smart plugs for holiday lighting, so it's very easy to set a schedule up, so you can turn the lights on and off when you want them on and off.
That's nice. So there is a thing as like a smart outlet, right?
Right. This would be wired into the outlet, so you'd remove your outlet.
So this is different.
Right. These plugs are becoming very popular because you just plug them in. There's no wiring involved. But Leviton and Top Greener, they have outlets that are wired in the wall. So you remove your outlet, one side is always on, and the other side is smart. So you can control it with an app or a smart speaker. If you plan on using a smart plug for an appliance like a coffee maker, an iron, or a fan, you should look at the amps. So a 15 amp smart plug would be considered heavy duty. Something that's less than that would be more for controlling a lamp. And if you're controlling a lamp, look for dimmable plugs. This way you have more light levels. And use incandescent, halogen, or dimmable CFLs or LED bulbs. And I saw, if you're looking for an outdoor rated smart plug, I saw one by iHome. It's a small I and then capital HOME, so you can actually use this outside. And this would be really convenient for holiday lighting.
Okay.
Some top rated smart plugs are from Leviton. It's Leviton, GE, Iris, IRIS, TP-Link, it's TP-LINK, Wemo, it's WEMO, and Top Greener, it's TOPGREENER.
So when you're shopping for smart switches and outlets and plugs, I guess,
Right.
you have to see what wireless system they're using.
Right. And
Because they don't all talk to each other.
Right. There's 4 main types of wireless standards. You have Zigbee, Z-Wave, Wi-Fi, and Bluetooth. And then some companies are using a different radio frequency unique to their products. So the key thing to think about when you're shopping for smart switches and outlets is, do you plan on just having a couple that you're only going to use with your phone or smart speakers? Or are you going to be adding smart devices or systems later on? Or what smart devices do you have now? So if you have Amazon Echo, Google Assistant, SmartThings, or Apple HomeKit, you need to get devices that are going to work with your system.
This is a lot of work.
Yeah, you actually have to do a little research, yeah. I was looking at smart switches in one store, and they had 3 GE smart switches next to each other. So one was the GE Zigbee smart switch, and it works with Echo Plus or hubs with Zigbee, so like SmartThings. The next switch was the GE Bluetooth smart switch, and it only works with a mobile app on your smartphone. And then there was the GE Z-Wave smart switch. So you can control this with a hub with Z-Wave, like SmartThings or Iris. And the packaging says it doesn't work with Google Assistant or Apple HomeKit. You'd need a hub for that. And then there were 3 Leviton switches. So one was the Decora switch that works with Bluetooth on your phone. Doesn't need a hub. There's no Wi-Fi. It works 30 feet from your phone. The Leviton Decora Smart Wi-Fi switch works with Amazon Echo or Google Assistant. And the Leviton Decora Wi-Fi dimmer, you don't need a hub. It works with Amazon Echo and Google Assistant, and you can control this from anywhere. So you can be outside your home,
right,
and turn it on.
You have to make sure that you read the packages because they all look very similar.
Right, yeah, some of them really do.
But you could pick up 2 switches, and they're 2 different ones, and they're not going to work together.
Right, absolutely. I was looking at some of the top greener Wi-Fi switches and dimmer switches, and they can be controlled with Google Assistant, Amazon Echo, or a phone app. No hub is required, and these work with IFTTT.
What is that?
So this is a free online platform you could set up. So this can communicate between apps, so it makes it convenient for a lot of these smart devices.
What does it stand for?
If this, then that. So if this happens, then another action takes place. The Lutron Caseta wireless switches, they work with Amazon Echo, Google Assistant, Apple HomeKit, Nest, and Serena remote control shades. And these Caseta switches, they need a smart bridge.
What is that?
It's a device you plug into your Wi-Fi router, and it connects devices that don't have Wi-Fi chips to the internet, or it's going to connect devices that are on a different frequency like Zigbee, and that way they can connect to the internet.
You keep saying hub.
Right.
What do you mean by that?
So a hub can be similar to a bridge or more complex to communicate with a variety of different wireless standards.
Oh, well, that clears it up.
So basically you can have multiple devices from different companies controlled with one app. So it's kind of like having a universal remote.
Okay. I think that would have been an easier way to say it.
But you still have to see what company's devices connect to it. So just because you have a hub doesn't mean that all companies' wireless frequencies are going to communicate with this. So you still have to do your homework.
Okay.
SmartThings is a popular hub, and this supports Zigbee, Z-Wave, Bluetooth, and Wi-Fi, and it can connect to outlets and switches from Leviton, Lutron, GE, Belkin, Eaton, and Honeywell, but just specific switches, so you still have to read the label. And SmartThings can also control security sensors on doors and windows, water leak sensors, door locks, motion sensors, and tracking devices.
I'm kind of scared to ask, but what are tracking devices?
So these are cool. You can attach these to, let's say, your kid's belt loop, a backpack, a dog collar. You can put it on your keys, and it uses GPS to track this. So in real time, you can look at your smartphone, for example, and see exactly where this device is, or whoever you've attached it to. So that's pretty cool. And if you're thinking about getting a smart speaker, the Amazon Echo Plus has a built-in hub, and that's going to allow you to work with a lot of devices.
Mm-hmm.
If you're purchasing an in-wall smart outlet, and so let's say you're removing your old outlet and you're wiring this into your wall, you want to check the breaker or your fuse in older homes to see how many amps that circuit is, and you want to match it, either 15 or 20 amp. If you're putting a 20 amp outlet in a 15 amp circuit, it could potentially be a fire hazard. And for smart switches, you want to see what type of bulbs it will work with and then the total amount of watts. So one Leviton Decora Smart Wi-Fi switch I looked at was 600 watts for LEDs and CFLs, 1800 watts for incandescent and halogen. A Top Greener Wi-Fi dimmer I looked at was 600 watts for incandescent and halogen, up to 150 watts for CFLs and LEDs. And if you're getting smart dimmers, you need to get dimmable LEDs or CFLs. They're not all dimmable.
Okay.
You also need to know whether you need a single pole or a three-way switch. So many of these switches can be used as a single pole or a three-way depending on how you wire it.
It's going to state it on the package though.
Right. And these are going to be the most versatile, especially if you ever decide to move the switch to a new location.
So what, you're moving and you're going to take your switches?
Yeah, taking my switches with me. So with conventional switches, a single pole switch is used if you only have control of your light from one location. There's no other switch that works with it to control your light. You have a single pole switch. If you can control your light or a group of lights from multiple locations, you have a three-way switch. Or
which doesn't make sense.
So with conventional switches, if you have only two switches that work together to control your light, you have a pair of three-way switches. If you have three switches that control your light, you have a pair of three-way switches and a four-way switch. With smart switches, you have to read the packaging if you're using it as a three-way. Top Greener, for example, that second switch can be a standard single pole or a three-way switch.
Really?
So it's very unique wiring. Some companies like Leviton, if you have more than one switch operating your lights, you can't use anything other than a coordinating switch. So you have to check the box and get that model number for the second switch. You can't just use a pair of three-way switches like with conventional three-way switches. Lutron has a unique remote control for multiple switches for a light. You can use it as a handheld switch, or you can attach it to a wall plate. You don't have to do any wiring. You just add a battery to it.
Huh. Interesting.
With conventional single-pole switches, you have two screw terminals and a ground, and it doesn't matter which screw terminal you connect to which hot wire. On a conventional single-pole or a three-way switch, there's not a neutral wire connected to the switch.
Right.
With smart switches, there's going to be one side that's marked top or up, or there's going to be an arrow pointing up, and you need to wire it with the line or the feed wire to a specific screw terminal. And depending on the switch, you're going to need to connect a neutral wire to the switch.
So it's going to say that on the package.
Right, and that's something you should definitely look for in the package, because if you have an older home and the switch box doesn't have a neutral, you wouldn't be able to use that switch here, a smart switch, unless you rewired the box. Lutron, though, has some smart switches that don't require a neutral wire, but the switch doesn't work with all bulbs. So you need to go to their website and look at the approved LEDs and CFLs.
Wow.
So that you can match it.
There's a lot of reading involved with these smart switches.
Yeah, there really is. If you have a smart switch that can be wired as a single pole or a three-way, and you want to wire it as a single pole, you'd connect the feed or the line wire coming from the service panel to the screw terminal listed in the wiring instructions. So you really have to look at how it's wired. On some of these switches, it's going to be marked as hot or black. You're just going to have to look. And the wire going up to the light will be marked as load, or it's going to be red. Usually that extra screw terminal for the three-way connection is going to have tape over it. Or if you have wire leads on your switch, you're going to have one wire with a wire connector, and then you would use that if you're wiring it as a three-way.
How do you find the feed wire?
So you're going to turn off the power to the circuit you're working on, check that it's off with an electrical tester. You're going to remove the switch, separate all the wires so nothing's touching, turn the power back on, and with your tester, you're going to find the hot wire. And this is the feed or the line coming from the service panel. You're going to mark it and then turn off the power when you're putting in the new switch. You never want to do any of these projects with the electric on. A shock under the right circumstances can be deadly. For wiring a smart switch as a three-way, it's not like a conventional pair of three-ways if you have two switches that operate your lights. So with standard three-way switches, you would turn off the power, you'd take off the cover, find the wire that's going to the dark-colored screw terminal and mark it in each box. And that's your common. So you would connect the marked wire to the dark-colored screw on the two new switches, And those other 2 wires would go to the light-colored screws. Those are your travelers. And it doesn't matter which wire you put on which traveler screw. So pretty straightforward, pretty easy. With the smart switches, every manual I looked at had a different way of wiring it.
Wow.
So
we're not going to cover that, are we?
No, you definitely have to read the instructions on how to wire it as a pair of 3-ways. Another thing to look at before you buy a smart switch is how much room do you have in your electrical box. So smart switches are big.
Yeah,
and,
like the body is big.
And many of the pros are now recommending have a electrical box that's 2 3/4 inches deep or larger. Mm-hmm. So like here in the Chicago area, 1.5 to 2 inch deep boxes are pretty common.
They're tiny.
So if you plan on adding smart devices, you need to check it first, and you may need to update your boxes.
Right.
Many smart dimmers will also have an air gap, so smart dimmers usually have a small amount of power going to the light even when the bulb is off, which could potentially be a shock hazard. And an air gap is a switch, or it's a piece that pulls out of the switch, so you're completely disconnecting it to the light. So if your dimmer has an air gap, always use it when you're changing a bulb. That way you don't have a chance of getting shocked. And if you're using a smart dimmer for dimmable LEDs and CFLs, you want to check to see if there's an adjustment for setting the minimum load level for your LED or CFL. Or is it automatic? Many of these smart dimmers, it automatically will set the minimum load level for LEDs so you don't have flickering.
So if you're installing any smart switch, you need to read all the instructions.
Right, yeah. Yeah, and it's funny how each company has a little different system. Mm-hmm. Their electronics are different. If you plan on doing some wiring projects around the house and you're running a cable for a switch, the new electrical code for most locations requires a neutral wire in the box now. And this is going to allow you to add smart switches or timers in the future. In the past, many switch boxes going to a switched outlet, for example, wouldn't have a neutral.
So you should put in a bigger box, too.
Yeah, right. Very smart. Yeah, 2 3/4 deeper for some of these smart switches. And you would just cap off that neutral wire. You'd have that neutral wire connected all the way back to the service panel, ready to be used if you need a device later in that box that requires a neutral.
So you're using what, 12.3, 14.3?
12.3 or 14.3 with a ground. There are also smart in-wall timers now. Intermatic has a top-rated one that you can control and set up with a phone app. It works through Wi-Fi. You can also control it with Amazon Echo, and it can be wired as a single pole or a 3-way, and this would require a neutral wire.
What are some top-rated smart switches?
Top Greener, Leviton, Lutron, TP-Link, GE, Wemo, and Eaton.
Do you have anything else to add?
Do you plan on having just 1 or 2 switches or a variety of smart switches over time? You're going to need to match the products and the wireless standards that they're using. Do you plan on getting a hub or smart speaker? You'd also want to think about that and make sure everything works together.
So they're all talking to each other.
Exactly. And then check your electrical switch boxes first to see if you have a neutral wire and how deep they are.
Let's wrap this up.
You can subscribe to our podcast on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, CastBox, Player FM, or your favorite podcast app.
If you enjoyed it, please leave us a review.
You can check out our home improvement videos on our YouTube channel, Fix It Home Improvement.
And you can subscribe to that as well.
You can download our books, Home Improvement Solutions, What Every Homeowner Should Know, on Amazon, book 1 through 5.
If you enjoyed it, please leave us a 5-star rating and review.
You can email us at fixitpodcast@gmail.com, and you can follow Cindy on Twitter at FixItCohost.
Thank you for listening.
Talk to you next week.